All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich. Bob is out sick tonight, and Sean, as we all know, is still recovering from his burns. I do not have an update today. I'm still trying to get as many updates as I can, but as I get new news, I will post that along. In the meantime, we have our special guest. You know him, you love him on Twitter. This is the infamous Budrich, my son, Matt. How you doing, Matt? Oh, he is broadcasting from Longview, Texas, where he now lives. So, how you doing, Matt?
I'm doing all right. I'm just frustrated with work, but I'm glad to fill in for Bob while he hopefully he gets better with whatever ailment he has.
Yeah, he's got 2 down with the flu. He wasn't feeling good. I don't think he even went trick or treating last night. So, yeah, he was having a rough time.
But he bump into Devontae Adams or something on the way out.
No, Devontae Adams couldn't catch anything. Taylor shut him down. So I watched the game. Did you get a chance to watch it?
Yeah. Fortunately, with how internet TV can kind of get, as long as the home location is set in New Orleans, even while I'm in Texas, I can still get all the local New Orleans channels, and so the New Orleans like game kind of schedules and blackouts and that kind of stuff. So I was able to watch the game on Fox. I'm sorry, CBS. It was on CBS on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, what were your thoughts of the game? I mean, this is one of those kind of games that, you tell me that Michael Thomas isn't playing again, Jarvis Landry's not playing. We got Marshawn Lattimore down, one of the worst tackling defenses in the league. You've got, problems with penalties, giving up big plays, and stopping the run, and you're facing Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams. What kind of game did you expect? Because I expected a ugly, ugly game.
I expected Josh Jacobs to continue his hot streak because prior to coming in to playing the Saints, over the past 3 games, he ran for over 450 yards and had 6 rushing touchdowns. And he went up against some bad run defenses. And given how the Saints were struggling with tackling and all that, I thought it was going to be more of the same. He was going to run for over 100 yards, have maybe 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns. Devontae Adams definitely was going to be, I thought it was going to be a problem. I don't know who he was going to line up against, whether going to be Adebo still kind of hobbled or Alontae Taylor, who did well against Hopkins but for the most part, but I don't know. I think Adams is slightly a little better route runner than Hopkins.
Yeah, Hopkins had like 10 catches on him. He didn't really break a big one, but he did catch some passes, but they threw to him a lot. I was frankly stunned with the Raiders' game plan. Okay, let's back up a little bit. I have no respect for Josh McDaniels as a head coach. I thought
same.
he was terrible in Denver. I never thought much of him as an offensive coordinator in New England, and I could never understand the infatuation people have with Patriot assistant coaches because anybody coming to even general managers and stuff, anybody coming to Belichick tree was terrible in the pros.
Oh, yeah. And there's actually a funny story that kind of came out that I found on Twitter. I wish I could pull up the link, but apparently with all the coaches that come out from the Belichick tree, they're very arrogant, and they think just because it came from a franchise that's won multiple Super Bowls, been to the playoffs like every single year and such, they think they're the most top of the town. They should demand respect. You should listen immediately what they say, and when they crash and burn, they lose a locker room very quickly. And I don't even think they get humbled because clearly Josh McDaniel is still walking around like he's the top of the town because, I coach Tom Brady. We've had one of the best offenses for quite some time. I've been part of the team of the decade twice now.
Yeah. Well, I read a story on Twitter. Guess who's the winningest former Belichick assistant in the NFL?
Bill O'Brien.
Yes, Bill O'Brien from the Texans. And anybody who's watched Urinating Tree knows that Bill O'Brien is, Bill Bill O'Brien is a hack.
Yeah.
That's all he ever said. Bill O'Brien is a hack.
Oh
Bill
yeah.
O'Brien, the one who got DeAndre Hopkins into Arizona because he had to have David Johnson. Bill O'Brien, who took over the general managership of the Texans and drove that franchise into the dirt. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so that is the resume of the Belichick assistants. Now, that being said, of course, the former defensive coordinator for Bill Belichick when he was with Cleveland is the one and only Nick Saban. Nick Saban was not successful in the NFL, but he was extremely successful, obviously, in the collegiate ranks.
Right.
So Nick Saban is the most successful of the former assistants as far as a coach. He also had, when he took over the Browns, um, Belichick instilled or groomed, I should say, a way of developing a draft philosophy that the famous Cleveland Browns receiver, who later became general manager of the team they play this week, the Baltimore Ravens. I just forgot his name.
Not Ozzy, is it?
Ozzie Newsome. Yeah,
Yeah.
Webster
Which.
Slaughter kept coming to my mind, and I'm like, it's not Webster
Yeah.
Slaughter, it's Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah.
Ozzie
Yeah.
Newsome, who was a master of the NFL draft.
Yeah. Which sadly
Raven,
he's no longer with the Ravens anymore.
no,
He retired maybe 4 years ago or so. I think his last first round pick. I think it was Lamar Jackson.
it was Lamar Jackson
Yeah.
was his last first round pick. Um, if anyone has not seen it, I highly recommend watching the A Football Life, the '95 Browns, because not only do you see the coaching tree begin for Bill Belichick with his assistants and the general managers and so forth that all came out of Cleveland and what he was trying to build in Cleveland, but the reality of that franchise. When Art Modell decided to move to Cleveland, from Cleveland to Baltimore, how that completely destroyed that season is the best way I can put it, because the '95 Browns were expected to be a Super Bowl contender that year because Belichick had been there for so long, had built this team in the mold of the old Giants, and Modell was running out of money. He famously had to borrow money from the bank to pay um, uh, Andre Rison, and he was working behind the scenes to move somewhere. He needed a new stadium. He needed an influx of cash. And Cleveland was unwilling to do it. Baltimore, who had been trying to get a team since their team left in 1983 for Indianapolis, eagerly gave him everything he wanted, including a new stadium. He just had to play in the old Memorial Stadium a couple of seasons before they moved to where they are today. So that's the connection between Bill Belichick, and the Baltimore Ravens. So let me ask you, what did you enjoy best about that win?
Well, outside of Pete Werner just being Pete Werner, I think the defensive line probably played its best game it has had since probably week 2 against Tampa, where they made both Marcus Davenport and Peyton Turner made their first round pick for 2018, Colton Miller, have his worst game of the season. Together they had like 7 pressures and got 2 sacks. Well, should have been 3, but unfortunately, because of a holding penalty on
Mm-hmm.
a Adebo, it went to it got waved off, and it gave the Rays a fresh set of downs. But you can tell Colton Miller, whether it's Davenport or Turner, he struggled. And even the rest of the defensive line really stepped up. Malcolm Roach had a couple pressures. Contavious Street had a good run stuff. Ayamada finally showed himself and played well. Cam Jordan did well. That Derek Carr was not comfortable at all in that pocket. He was just looking for something, anything, and he just couldn't.
Yeah. And that's what I was getting at with the whole bashing of McDaniels. Their game plan was garbage. It really was.
Yeah,
They just felt like they could do whatever they wanted. And um, a great example of that is what I consider the turning point in the game. The Saints are up 7-0, and the Browns, I mean, the Browns, the Raiders
Raiders.
decided to do a fake punt. Okay. And I saw this on another podcast earlier, and I had noticed a couple of things about it. But basically, whenever a team is going to run a fake punt, they have it the option to audible. Okay.
Hmm.
You're either going to run it or you're not going to run it. Now, going back to the NFC Championship game in back in 1990, uh, Sean Landetta, Parcells said, run the fake punt. And Landetta says, they're lined up for it. They know it's coming. And Parcells says, run it anyway. And they noticed a hole in the defense. One guy forgot to get out there for special teams, so only had 10 men at the line of 10 men on the field. They had a huge hole. The ball was snapped to Gary Reasons. He takes off and runs with it. Landetta, had he not seen that, wanted to audible back to an actual punt, and don't run it. Well, the Saints had studied film enough and knew the formations that the Raiders like to do when they're going to do a fake punt. And if you go back to, I think it was the Vikings game, they ran the successful fake punt.
Yeah, because Andrew Juge mentioned it. So the Saints formation that they did was basically the stay formation, where
Yeah.
they just had the punt returner be back there, but the rest of the defensive stars were there. And I found something
Yes.
interesting because Marcus Davenport was lined up with Demario Davis, the linebacker, and they had a different defensive end on the ground. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty interesting. But the moment I saw that formation come, I'm like, do the Raiders even think that was going to work? Because they had the Gunners line up on the same side of the field,
Yes.
and
And
it
and
it
that's
was
where I
just
was going with this.
yeah.
The there should have been a guy, either the up back or the punter, makes the call and says, you know what, it's not going to work. Audible, we're going to go ahead and punt the ball, pin them deep. They're not really set up to cover. This is just going to be a fair catch. We can pin them deep and let our defense live for another day. Instead, they ran it anyway. And of course, it got blown up because you don't have the Gunners peeling back. You don't have, you know, a JT Gray out there. You don't have, Dwayne Washington and the special teamers I'm talking about,
Yeah.
Daniel Sorensen. They're not all out there playing. So your numbers are wrong. Your matchups are all wrong. You should have never run that play, but they ran it. And because of that, the Saints got short field and they got the penalty yardage too, because I think there was an illegal chop block on the
Yeah,
play.
because I think it was one of the tight ends or backs
Mhm.
that was supposed to be the lead blocker tried to chop block Cam Jordan. Fortunately, he didn't get hurt because those chop blocks,
Yeah.
those can really screw you up at the knees. But fortunately, he doesn't get hurt. And so even if they were to somehow get it, they would have to move 15 yards back anyway, and they'd be in the same situation where they would have to punt if not. But it didn't work. But for a
No.
while, I didn't think the running back was going to get it because where they were also lined up, it felt like they were on the strong side. They were not on the strong side; they were on the weak side. But I thought originally it was going to get snapped to the punt. He was going to try and run it based on how the formation was, and instead it was just direct snap to the back, and he was going to try and power through.
Yeah, it was a power sweep. It was basically a power sweep. But the idea with the power sweep is you're coming along. You're hoping the gunner takes off with the coverage takes off with the gunner, and the
Hmm.
guys start peeling back to block. So you've got an open lane to run. He's got two blockers in front. You probably get big yardage on that play.
Yeah,
But clearly, all you do is look at the personnel out there, and the personnel would have told you can't run this play. You cannot run this fake punt.
yeah,
You go back to when Sean Payton ran the fake punt against the Eagles. What did he say after the post game? He said, look, we noticed two things about the Eagles and their punt coverage. Number one, we noticed that I can't think of his name now. The guy came from Philadelphia, and I'm from Seattle.
Sidney
Michael
Jones.
Bennett. No, Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett. He's always high on coverage. He doesn't get down low. He blocks up high. So the Saints said we can cut him low. We'll create the alleyway, and Taysom can shoot through and get the 2 yards, even though they were punting from I think their own 20. And it was a playoff game. We know we can get that fake punt. And we know we can call it any time because that's how the Eagles line up. And I think the second one was the Eagles. They peel back almost immediately. They don't rush the punter. They started to peel back immediately to cover for the return. So they knew both of those things was playing in their favor. So they had the plan in the whole time. We know we're going to get the fake punt. It's just a matter of when we're going to call it. And Peyton called it at that point because he felt like we're already down 14-0. The offense is lethargic. If we run this fake punt, we'll get something going. So yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. So there was so many things, and again, that's about coaching. It's about being aware, and clearly they were just out coached in this game.
Yeah.
Tigmaster. The Raiders did not cross the 50 until about 2 minutes left in the game. Exactly right.
And that was with their backup quarterback too, not even Derek Carr.
Yeah, and the last time that happened, where the Saints didn't allow an opponent to cross the 50 was way back in 2006 against the Giants. You remember that game?
That was a Christmas Eve game.
Yes.
Yeah, we were over at Mandeville at that point with Nanny Diane.
Yes, we were at that. We were there. We were watching the game, and the Giants never crossed the 50. That was another shutout.
No, that wasn't a shutout.
It wasn't a shutout?
No, because they eventually did score. Because the Saints prior.
Oh, that's right. Yes, they gave up some garbage points. That's right. Okay, so this was the Saints' first shutout since 2021 against the Buccaneers, 9-0 in Tampa. This is the first home shutout though since 2012, when once again we shut out the Bucs. Josh Freeman's Bucs in 2012, 41-0. I really wanted that shutout too. I did not want to give up that garbage touchdown at the end of the game.
Yeah, and there's actually a couple fun Saints stats because I got it pulled up. So, believe it or not, it was the second time we actually shut out the Raiders, and the last time it was at home in the back then Louisiana Superdome. Guess the date.
That would be December 16th, 1991.
Yep. Shut him out 27-0.
Where's John Butler? I was at that game. I actually was. I got taken. That was a birthday game. Miss Margaret and Mr. Henry. I don't know if you remember them or not, but they were my college friends. They took me to that game, and that was a shutout. I do remember that game.
Yeah, and the stats are near similar. Just some blank stats: 26 first downs back in 91, 22. On Sunday. About 100-yard difference between 91 to 2022. Shut him out, got him like 117 yards, and third down percentage was almost similar too. 58 for the Saints in 2022, 60% back in 91.
Yeah, that was a Monday night game. I do remember that. And that was Bobby Hebert's first game back after his injuries.
Yeah, he threw for over 320 yards, but 0 touchdowns.
Yeah, he was terrible in the first half. He got a lot better in the second half. The first half of that game was not very entertaining. The second half was a lot better.
Yeah.
But
the box score indicated too.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Bobby Hebert came back healthy in that game, and that was the second to last game of the season. The last game was against the Cardinals in Arizona. But the Saints were losing their secondary players each week. The week before, I think Torrey Cook broke his arm against the Dallas Cowboys. I know Vince Buck had the neck stinger against the 49ers in San Francisco. So we were kind of getting set up for what was going to happen in that playoff game, where you had guys like Calvin Nicholson playing corner and
Brett,
Mark
yeah,
Petrie. Uh,
Brett Maxey.
well, Brett Maxey was a safety, but Mark Petrie had to play corner because they were out of players. They were
Yeah,
out of players. Yeah. So yeah, it was. It's fun to be in a Superdome for a shutout because it's almost like, okay, I'm going back in time when I was a kid, when the New Orleans Jazz were in existence. You used to get free fries if the Jazz scored over 100 points. So, and they got them from Burger King. And the fans would start chanting free fries as you got closer to 100 points. And back then, there's no 3-point line. So it's all baskets,
yeah,
So it took you a little time to get to 100 points. And despite what David Brenner, longtime guest host of the Tonight Show and comedian in the 70s, this David Brenner had a joke. Basketball was boring to him. Just give each team 100 points and let them play for 2 minutes. He said that's all.
yeah,
That's all you needed to see.
yeah,
The rest of it was just boring for him. But the idea was, you got you got over 100 points. You brought your ticket to a Burger King and you got a free order of small
yeah.
fries.
Now you're making me think of back in I think they were still the Hornets at this point. They had a home game which they won, but they didn't score 100 points because one of the reserves, Lance Thomas, misses a free throw, his second free throw, and they won like 99 to 90 something. And he goes out
Mm-hmm.
to, I think it was McDonald's at this point because that's who they had to deal with, and spent like $1,000 giving people free fries at like one or two locations.
Yeah, I mean it was anywhere in the city, and yeah, that was the big thing because the Jazz weren't winning very much back then. Yeah, Pistol Pete, and you had some players. I could name some players from back in the day, Gail Goodrich and guys like that. But I mean, Pistol Pete was the drawing thing, and Hot Rod Hundley was the play-by-play guy, and every time you take a shot, Pistol Pete. So I can remember all that because Papa took me to a lot of games when I was a kid. Um, anyway, we're really talking about the Saints history, not so much
Yeah,
the Jazz history, but that was the idea though back then. I mean, the crowd feeds off of, we want that shutout, so
yeah.
the cheers get louder each time, and they're counting down the clock and everything else. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Hey, in the 70s, I mean, anything went. It's hard to imagine a basketball game getting played in the Superdome. But yeah, they used to pull all the seats all the way up, and the court was in the middle of the stadium. And they actually sold seats in the plaza, the terrace. I can't imagine watching a basketball game from up there, but people did back then. And they had the gondola hanging down, so you had the big screen, so you'd be able to see what was going on the floor. But they like ants running around out there from back there.
Right.
Um, but okay, so what were some of your favorite plays in that game? I had a couple of them that
Yeah.
really stand out to me. What were some of your favorite plays in that game?
Well, they're probably the obvious ones. The first one was Davenport's
Oh yeah.
almost murdering Devontae Adams on an end around. Because you see Colton Miller, like I before the show began, I was just pulling up I was looking up Colton Miller on Twitter to see how Raiders thought of him. He is getting roasted alive by these Raiders fans because they knew he had a terrible game, and they're like, he's having a terrible season. We should have got rid of him. Why didn't we trade him at the deadline? And but when I saw that play happen, because I didn't have my phone with me, I basically left it in the kitchen, and I see that play happen. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
Davenport, you are violence today.
I mean, he picked him like I described him on Good, Bad, and Ugly. He picked him up like a cart, like a little kid, and
Yeah.
like a kid running away from you, and you still see his feet going.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and then he drops him.
I thought. I saw. I think his offensive lineman, just because of where the positioning was, kind of saved him from Davenport just slamming him straight to the ground, just like how he did.
Oh
But
yeah, well yeah, he would have got
yeah.
drawn a flag by doing that. But
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. But yeah.
just picking him up and dropping him on the ground, that was one of my favorite plays.
Yeah.
One of mine, it was one of the three Camaro TD runs, and
Yeah,
it's the third one.
yeah. I was
Well,
about to get to that too because
yeah.
I like how the play kind of formed. So Denzel Perryman is the guy who's supposed to cover Kamara. It's like it's a kind of a man zone kind of situation.
Hmm.
And it looked like it was supposed to be the Texas play, but he's clearly run the route for the Texas play where he tries to cut in, then immediately cuts back to the middle. You see Perryman start to follow him, but then he over pursues and tries to go more towards the sideline, and this forces him to get caught up in all the traffic because I think it's Jawan Johnson and one other player. I don't know. I don't remember who it was. Callaway, Traquan. They're either running
It
clear
was,
routes or deep posts.
I think it was Callaway did
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. So Perryman is now caught up in traffic with the other defenders who are covering Juwan Johnson and Callaway, leaving Kamara
Hmm.
to have that middle wide open for not just a catch, but eventually the touchdown.
Yeah, yeah, the whole middle had opened wide up, and I really enjoyed. Well, first off, it's great having it before the night before Halloween, or the afternoon before Halloween. You got a linebacker named Diablo in the on the
Yeah.
Raiders. But
Divine Diablo.
yeah, but I really enjoyed that play because you really could see the speed of Kamara. He doesn't like he's really moving, but you could just see the separation he's getting, even though players have the angle on him. I enjoyed the second one as well. The one where he runs and it looks like they tried. I don't know what they were thinking, but they didn't wrap him up at all. They just kept hitting him, thinking that just a hit was going to bring him down.
Yeah, they
And
throw their shoulders.
yeah, and this last one was right near the goal line. He hits him, and all Kamara does is stick the ball out over, and then goes and pulls it back and goes down. And it's like that's it. That's a touchdown. That's
Yeah.
all he had to do. If you would have wrapped him up, you probably had a shot. But no, and so that was a great play.
Hmm.
Um, so this draft class now is starting to look like they're going to make a difference. Now these players are coming off of injured reserve and stuff. We already know about Chris Olave. He is definitely the go-to guy and is preventing us from reliving last year as far as receiving options. But Taylor, what are your impressions of Taylor?
He's very good. I think he's going to fight for that cornerback two spot. I mean, I read Nick Underhill's breakdown of it, and he makes a lot of good plays. I mean, I think that he definitely set the tone where he tackles Josh Jacobs on the first carry of the game, where he only gets 1 yard, and I think that's a great tone setter. He had some very good plays. He handled his matchup well against Devontae Adams, even though he did have a couple of mishaps, and he just got fortunately bailed out because both quarterbacks, Stidham and Carr, overthrow their man. On third down, he bits the underneath route and lets Matt Collins go, but I guess the pressure got the Carr and he just overshoots that ball. And while Matt
Yeah,
Collins is tall, he ain't that tall. And
yeah.
then that touchdown that almost was, he kind of lets Keelan Cole get by him, and Stidham just shows why he's a backup. He overshoots the ball and doesn't give Cole a chance to catch it.
Well, yeah. That first one, he was lucky. He made a bad read. He jumped the underneath route, and the route was already covered. And of course, the safety is in no position. So
Mhm.
if Carr makes a better throw, he hits this guy in stride, and it's a big play. And he actually overthrew it and threw it more out of bounds. So he didn't get that. Devontae Adams, I felt like that one that they challenged really, if you look at it closely, if this was a bigger game, they had more camera angles, they
Yeah,
probably give him that on review
yeah, because
because it looked like that foot came down inbounds and he drags the other toe.
the
But
cursed white shoes.
yeah, right, white shoes. But yeah, and the other thing is you don't really have a good reverse angle to
Yeah,
see where his foot was. So, and the
because you
ruling
need.
in the field was incomplete pass. So
Because yeah,
that played in the Saints' favor.
yeah, but and fun fact, CBS posted a set. So Devontae Adams had a streak going where he had like 81 games where he
Hmm.
had multiple catches, and the Saints stopped that because he only had one catch.
Yes, yes. It was a huge game because it reminded me, as far as Adams was concerned, it reminded me of Randy Moss when he was with the Patriots back in 2009. And you thought Randy Moss was really going to light up that secondary because Tracy Porter was out injured, Jabari Greer was out injured. So you're playing Mike McKenzie, who you pulled off the sofa the week before to play in that game.
Who had no
Uh,
knees at this point.
yeah, but so you're thinking, okay, Brady is going to be a shootout. Brady's going to be throwing to Moss. Moss is going to rip up that secondary. And the reality was the Saints were able to shut the Raiders' passing game down. Yeah, Renfro. You're right, Chad. Renfro had one catch only as well,
I don't think
and
he even targeted Renfro much.
yeah,
He
and
wanted to throw to Hollins or uh, the former LSU boy, Foster Moreau.
yeah. Well, when you didn't have Waller, I thought that was a great break for the Saints because I think Waller
Absolutely.
Waller would have been a matchup problem for the Saints.
Yeah, who do you
Um,
put on him?
yeah. Um, and Renfro didn't see the ball hardly at all. He was going to his third and fourth receivers, and he was really trying to isolate Adams, who had been sick with the flu. So that's probably the other reason why he wasn't as sharp as he should have been, was trying to isolate Adams on a lot of go routes and a lot of sideline, 9 rail routes. That's a 9 route. But he was trying to isolate them on rail routes and sideline routes with Taylor, and it didn't happen. And it's like they didn't know what else to do. You rarely saw Adams cut across the middle or run the Texas route or any of these kind of routes where you maybe put him in the slot and get him matched up against ancient Chris Harris. They never did any of that stuff. So we were
Yeah,
really lucky with the bad play calling.
or even give him like just little curl or stop routes and see what happens. They just
Yeah.
said, let's give him go routes. Let's give him these deep routes and see if we can get these big plays going. And just it wasn't
It was
happening.
like it was like Al Davis was calling plays, and it was the 1960s Raiders, and you had the Mad Bomber back there, Daryl LaMonica, and he's throwing to Warren Wells. I mean, it just come on, or Cliff Branch if you were a kid in the 70s and the early 80s. It just it none of these plays made sense, and I was very happy because the Saints needed a game like this.
Yeah.
Kamara has that discussion with in the locker room, talking about how some of the players are getting comfortable losing, and he gets the 3 touchdowns in the game. So he's walking the walk as well as his talk. The defense responded. The more the Raiders tried to get back into this game in 1 or 2 plays, the more it played into the Saints' defensive strengths.
Yeah. Because
Ken,
I was about to
go,
say, once the it got to 17-0, it was okay. We got to throw the ball. We got to pass ball, which played to the defensive line strength of trying to get a pass rush going, and fortunately
yeah.
it did.
Yeah, you're right. Renfro was coming off an injury, but I think they felt like that Jacobs was going to be the bulk of their offense, and they were going to take deep shots with Devontae Adams when they needed to. But they were just going to run Jacobs into the Saints defense all day long, and that was going to be their game plan, and it just was not a very good game plan at all. So yeah, Pete Werner is the heart of this defense right now. He is playing at all pro level, and Peyton Turner did make an appearance. He got 2 sacks. A lot of them was set up by plays from people like Marcus Davenport, really eating up blockers and the defensive line making plays and bullying that Raiders offensive line. Let me ask you this, though. The Ravens are a different kind of team. The Ravens have a mobile quarterback, a big mobile quarterback who most people say is more running back than quarterback. I know that sounds like a knock, but that's kind of how they view him. They are going to be without key players. Probably
Gus Edwards.
Gus Edwards, thank you, and Mark Andrews are going to be out. in this
Yeah.
game. I don't know if Dobbins is going to play or not.
I think he's still on injured reserve.
Okay.
Because they're also going to be without Marcus Williams because he's still on injured reserve with that wrist
Yeah.
injury. They're going to be
Hmm.
without wide receiver one Rashad Bateman. He got hurt in that game. Patrick Queen is going to be questionable because he got a shoulder injury, which is why they traded for Roquan Smith on Monday night. Uh, so he could be his status is up in the air. Mark Andrews is also up in the air because when Harbaugh came to the podium on Monday, he said it's nothing major. So there's a chance he might play. I mean, I basically tweeted I said when they said it's nothing major, I said, oh, he's playing Monday. Like he's going to get the 20 cc's of we play the Saints coming up. Just jab it in him.
Yeah, he no, it's not a Jim Everett jersey. Actually, I'm wearing it on a Billy Kilmer, but it's a Robert Meacham jersey I have on actually. His old jersey, by the way, my son's old jersey. It's but I'm wearing it for in honor of Billy Kilmer because we're going to talk about the old Saints in a minute. Roquan will probably play.
Probably
Um,
it's
yeah, I don't think he'll sit out any games. I think it's going to be Roquan playing in this game. Um, so my question to you is: they have these injuries, a lot of key stars out, and they did not look that good against the Bucs. They did score a lot of points, but only because Tampa looked even worse.
yeah.
They struggled a lot early. Can the Saints put together two in a row and take it to the Ravens like they did the Raiders? This is a team that the Ravens I'm talking about, is a team the Saints have never beaten at home. They've only beaten them twice. Once against oh, Daisy can hear your voice and she's looking for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Allison must be watching this in her room.
Probably.
Okay. Um, yep, that's exactly what she's telling me. But anyway, they've never beaten the Ravens at home. They only have beaten the Ravens twice. Once was the Drew Brees game where he threw his 500th touchdown pass.
Where we had divine intervention from Tom Benson,
Yes, yes, where the most accurate kicker in the NFL history actually missed an extra point.
and a meme was
Um,
born.
yes, and the other one was way back in 2002, where let's talk about some former Saints here. Jake Delhomme came in for an injured Aaron Brooks um, in the second half and scored a touchdown, uh, but basically put the Ravens away. And the Ravens starting quarterback was actually injured in that game. And former Saints quarterback Jeff Blake finished that game played that game for the Ravens and started and lost. So um, it was, it's one of those things that, yeah, there's a lot of connections between the two teams, but that was the only two games that they had where the Saints have won most of the time. And we go to 2006, for example, the Saints lost to the Ravens.
They got beat hard.
Yeah, because the Ravens have traditionally been a very physical team that likes to beat you up. And make you earn every point against their defense. And now it seems that the Ravens are the defense is not as fearsome as it used to be. You can run on them, you can pass on them. They don't have they have a good but not a great pass rush. So they end up relying a lot more on Lamar Jackson. But the problem we have is Lamar Jackson's a mobile quarterback. You look at every time the Saints defense deals with a mobile quarterback, it's like they've never seen a running quarterback before in their life. They like to have those statues for quarterbacks that the defensive line knows where he's going to be at all times.
Yeah.
So how do you see this game playing out?
I guess the biggest question is if Baltimore gets that double-digit lead, because all three of their losses that they've had so far, they've had double-digit leads, whether it was against the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Bills. They got these big leads, and then they let them come back, and they uh they lost those games. And of course, most recent 2 games they managed to hold on to that lead. But the biggest thing to me is going to be I think it's going to be matching blow for blow, because I think Lamar Jackson running might be a bit of will be a big problem.
Mhm.
He's very fast. He knows how to hit the hole. It's going to be where tackling and pursuit angles are going to have to be crucial.
Yeah. My thing is the defense has to be more disciplined in their gap defense. Um, Keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket, make him beat you with his arm.
Yeah,
He can, but if he's missing Mark Andrews, if he's missing his top receivers, um, and if Marshawn Lattimore can come back for this game, and that's a big if. But
yeah,
if Marshawn Lattimore can come back for this game, we have a great chance of beating the Ravens for the first time in
in
the
the dome.
Superdome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I saw some things get posted. Apparently, there's good faith that both Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry might be back, as well as Adam Troutman. But there's probably not going to be a good chance Lattimore will be back. So it's probably going to be Taylor and Adebo probably being your starting outside corners again.
Yeah. And the defense is just going to have to be like they were in this game, really disciplined with their tackling and not make the mistakes.
Yeah.
Speaking of not making mistakes, Andy Dalton running this offense. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Eh, there are people who are frustrated that Jameis Winston is working out, but there are also people like, yeah, Andy Dalton is good, but he's not going to win a game for you. He's just not going to lose a game.
Yeah.
Um, uh, do you think, first off, do you think Andy Dalton can win games for you?
Maybe one or two. I th- I think one or two. I think he's good for 1 or 2 games where he can win you, where his performance will get you a win, and his performance alone. Just like how with Jameis, how last year his one performance against Washington got you that win. I think that's what it's good. I think that's what Dalton's pretty good for.
Well, my take on Andy Dalton is this: Andy Dalton's not going to lose games for you. He is, the Cardinals game aside, there were other things that went wrong in that game, but the Cardinals game aside, Andy Dalton is not going to make the mistakes that cost you a game. He's not going to really hit the big plays unless it's really set up well for him. And I'm thinking about that touchdown pass. Well, first up, the deep pass he threw early in the game, and a couple of touchdown passes he threw to Kamara. Those were well done, well designed setup plays.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of what he is. He at his point in his career, he's a game manager. He's not. He's certainly not a Pro Bowl quarterback anymore. He's a guy who is going to complete the short passes, and as long as they don't fall behind by double-digit scores, and they have to kind of abandon the run game and air it out all game, he can do what it needs to be done to run the offense, run the plays they want to run, and they're going to score. Okay.
Yeah.
Not having Thomas and Landry, I think, is part of the reason why they had, prior to this game, they've had red zone struggles. Okay. Because I think the receivers they have outside of Chris Olave really struggle to get separation. I'm talking about like Marquez Callaway, Kevin White, Traquan Smith, struggle to get separation in the red zone where you can't really scheme people open. It's just really about you being able to sell that pass route and create separation on your own. Michael Thomas is a master at that. Jarvis Landry is very good at that.
Hmm.
That gives him the small window he needs to throw the ball, and that will get them in the position to score. It also draws the attention away from Kamara, so Kamara can get open underneath.
Yeah.
So I think the red zone problems will get fixed when those guys start coming back. It's just a question of when they come back.
I think, especially with Michael Thomas, I think just his ability to use his frame and his strength to kind of bully his matchups
Mm-hmm.
will get will create better red zone cash-ins.
Yeah, because he can get away with what people consider pass interference.
Yeah.
Not full extent offensive pass interference, not getting full extension, but man, he can get that, hit you real quick with just his arms inside, hit you real quick, make that cut, turn around. This is part of the reason why it takes him so long to recover from injuries, because he needs to be able to feel confident in those cuts. Make that cut, create that small window. That ball's got to be right there. He's going to snatch it before the defensive back has a chance to react to it. And boom, there he is. All of a sudden, he's got a touchdown, or he's got you first and goal. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to see out of this.
Yeah.
Also, as long as they don't fall behind by a couple of scores, Kamara's still a factor. More importantly, Taysom Hill is still a factor. All those things go into play. So this is going to be another game where the Saints are going to have to get up early on the team. Defense is going to have to shut the other offense down and let our offense slowly plod their way through and get the plays, so the bigger plays open up later on, get the scores, build up a lead, then they can kind of control the tempo of the game like they did this week.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple things Chad brought up earlier. Where was it now? I know I saw it. Saints are getting very close to 2 records. Cam Jordan has 5 sacks on the year. I think he is 3 sacks behind. Yeah, here it is. Chad brought it up. AK and Cam approaching Saints all-time records.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Cam's I think 3 or 4 sacks away from breaking Ricky Jackson's official team record. And I say official because Jackson had 8 sacks in 1981, his rookie year, but those don't count because 1982 was the first year that stats were an official record. So
yeah,
I think
he's officially 3 away. Ricky Jackson has 115. Cam after this game has 112.
112. Okay, I was going to say 111. He's got 112. Okay. Will Cam get this record this week, or are we going to wait until? Unfortunately, we don't play that. Well, Matt Ryan's been benched now, but I was going to say if we played the Colts, I know we would get it there. But are we going to have to wait till the following week against the Steelers in Pittsburgh for Cam to break Ricky Jackson's record?
I think so. I would like to get it, get those 3.5 sacks because that's what he needs to beat it. But Lamar Jackson's a very tough guy to sack. It's the same way with like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. They're mobile. They're very mobile, and they're very, very tough to just get down. And even when you feel like you can sack them, they just somehow escape it. It's one of the reasons why I think Cam Jordan said one of the toughest guys he had to sack was Cam Newton back when he was with the Panthers. Prime Cam Newton, that is.
Yeah, well, Lamar Jackson's size makes it hard. And not only is he a mobile quarterback, he's a big man. So he's very difficult.
He's not that. He's 6'3", but he's not built like Cam or even the Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. He's very Michael Vick like. He's like 210 pounds, very elusive, very, very agile.
He looks bigger on TV then. I thought he was thicker than that because he looks pretty thick.
Yeah, he's not Taysom built. He's
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess purple's not a slimming color. So, and then Alvin Kamara. Marcus Colston has 72 touchdowns for his career. I think Kamara has 70
71
now.
now
71 now.
because he was at 68 prior to the game, and he had 69 after he scored his first touchdown. And then after the next two,
Yeah.
he's now at 71.
That is amazing considering how long. Now, granted, he's a receiver as opposed to a running back, but how long? Kamara's in his what, fifth season, sixth season with the
Yeah, probably
Saints?
sixth. Yeah,
Sixth season.
2017. So yeah, sixth.
Yeah. So Colston played what was it, 9 seasons with the Saints, 2006 to 2014?
15. He was there in 15, so 10 seasons.
10 seasons to get
Yeah.
72. And we're looking at almost half, a little bit more than half, and he's going to pass him in his sixth season. Meanwhile, on the all-time rushing record, let's see how up to date this is. Because last time I looked at it, they didn't have 2022 in it. Okay, Kamara. It's been updated. Okay, when I looked at it on Sunday, it hadn't been updated yet. But yeah, he is third, but a distant third on the all-time rushing list. In 79 games, he has 4,651 yards. And Deuce has 6,096. Ingram has now 6,463 yards. But yeah, it's amazing that Kamara is already past George Rogers, Dalton Hilliard, Pierre Thomas, Reuben Mays, Chuck Muncie, the Saints' first 1,000-yard rusher, Ricky Jackson, and Tony Galbraith. That's your top 10. So yeah. Taysom Hill is number 17 on the list. That's hilarious. I didn't even realize he was that high up. Taysom Hill is ahead of guys like Aaron Brooks, Derek Brown, Hokie Gajan, Ray Zellers, Latavius Murray, Chris Ivory, and now we're going back in time with these names: Jess Phillips, Alvin Maxson, Aaron Stecker. So yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, Taysom Hill is 17. He is about 300 yards away from passing Craig Hayward. Just to give you an idea. But Craig Hayward didn't get to run the ball that much. He was mainly a blocker. But yeah, you start thinking about Saints rushers. There's not a whole lot of games, whole lot of plays, I should say, that the Saints kept running backs for a long time. I mean, George Rogers was here 3 seasons, 81 to 84. Deuce McAllister played, 7 seasons, but he was injured for 2 of them, 2007, 2005. So backs just don't last that long in the system. Dalton Hilliard was the second longest tenured guy, 1986 to 93. So it's just it's the list is a lot of favorite names, but not that impressive. Only because the Saints don't keep running backs that long.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at someone like Alvin Kamara. He's close. I mean, he's so far of that top 5, the only one without a 1,000-yard rushing season.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, exactly. And I do see Ingram getting some more touchdowns. I really do. It'll happen, but I don't know how much longer Ingram's going to be with the Saints. I think this might be his last season. He is kind of running the end of the road here.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. Why running backs don't last a whole length of time. I mean, you think about Detroit. If you look at your top running backs, the Detroit Lions, you're going to get Barry Sanders, obviously number 1, Billy Sims is probably number 2. And then the next name on that list, I doubt it's Gary James, but I'm going to guess that the next Detroit Lions player is somebody from the 60s. I'm just going to look this up.
I got it up. So
Yeah.
Barry Sanders number 1, number 2 Billy Sims, number 3 Dexter Busey.
From the 70s.
Then Elite Taylor, and then number 5 is, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that name.
Nick Pietro Sante. Yeah. So I mean, that's somebody from 65. So yeah, you've got Barry Sanders at 15,269 yards, Billy Sims 5,106 yards, and he's only ahead of Dexter Busey, who was the guy before him, by 1 yard. And Billy Sims, unfortunately, he tore his knee up, and he was never the same. He couldn't come back from that. But let's see, Mel Farr, that's a famous one. James Stewart, I remember him. Poor Greg Landry, he's number 13. Wow. I'm scrolling down. I still don't see Gary James. Gary James is 25. I didn't realize he was that bad. And the only reason I'm bringing up Gary James is, okay, Gary James was the running back who played with Dalton Hilliard at LSU. And everyone thought Gary James was going to be the guy. That was going to be the running back in the NFL. And Dalton Hilliard, he might be a kick returner. He's short. He's got big legs, but he's not going to be able to do very much. Dalton Hilliard has a lot more rushing yards than Gary James. Gary James just barely 1,500 yards for his career with the Lions. Doak Walker. He goes to the Steelers, and that's now an award named after him, number 24 on that list. But yeah, that's the thing about great running backs. Who's that? Best could have been something special. Concussion took him out of the game. Who are we talking about, Chad? I'm sorry. I'm just looking at this.
Javid Best.
Oh, Javid Best. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, you remember him. The kid from Cal from 2010. He fell to the second round because he got flipped over and landed on his head awkwardly, and he was in a prone state for a few seconds. He had to get carted off. He did get drafted, and he had a couple good seasons, but after 2011, he had another concussion, and he called it quits and went to track and field afterwards.
Okay. Speaking of which, I did this last time. A lot of Lions players had got concussions on the field, and they looked like they got killed. Joe Ferguson, Eric Hipple, Greg Landry. Well, there was a player who actually did die on the football field, and he was a Detroit Lions player. In 1971, this man, his name was Chuck Hughes. He was playing the Bears at Old Tiger Stadium. That's where the Lions used to play before the Silverdome was built, where the Detroit Tigers used to play as well. Outdoor stadium. And Hughes came in as an injury replacement, caught a pass from quarterback Greg Landry for 32 yards on the first down on the Bears' 37-yard line. 3 plays later, Landry threw a pass that tight end Charlie Sanders dropped near the end zone. Hughes was a decoy in the play, began running back to the huddle with 1:02 showing on the clock. Suddenly, he dropped to the turf, clutching his chest around the 20-yard line. Hughes collapsed near the Bears linebacker Dick Butkus, who saw him begin to convulse violently on the field. Butkus motioned to the sideline frantically to get Hughes' assistance. All the teams, both teams' doctors and trainers, and then a physician who was in the stands tried to save him. An ambulance was called, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead at 5:34 that afternoon, 28 years old. And believe it or not, A guy can die on the field, but the game was played to its conclusion in front of a now stunned, silent crowd in Tiger Stadium. I mean, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, they told the what happened. They told what happened to Chuck Hughes after the game was over with. It was found that he had uh, a version of arterial. I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. Arteriosclerosis, one of his coronary arteries was 75% blocked, and a family history of heart disease. And the cause of death was a pulmonary thrombosis, which caused a massive heart attack right there on the field. And yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, that every time someone talks about, what happened to players in the field where you think he died. Well, there was one person. So that's a trivia question. One person who actually did die on a football field, Chuck Hughes. Um, yeah, yeah. Well, here's the thing, John. In the '70s, when the Superdome was built in '75, in the middle of the '70s, you had a lot of people thinking that multi-purpose stadiums were the secret to saving cities money, and then especially in either extremely cold or extremely hot environments like New Orleans or Detroit, Minnesota. Having a dome stadium was great because now the fans could enjoy the weather, air conditioning all season long. They have to deal with the snow and everything else. So, yeah, you had the Silverdome, you had the Superdome, you had the Metrodome in Minnesota, and then you had the multi-purpose stadiums like Busch Stadium in St. Louis, where the Cardinals used to play, Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh, Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, um, the Veteran Stadium in Philadelphia. With that AstroTurf, and it was a baseball stadium and also a football stadium. So you had the grooves in. The Astrodome was like that, and players hated it because in these stadiums, those grooves, especially when it was still baseball season, they really didn't fill that stuff in. So you can get your fingers caught in those grooves. It was like you're playing on concrete with sporadic metal plates covering areas where the baseball field was. It was just, yeah, it was miserable. People hated it. Hated it. Um, Calvin, we kind of just talked about the Raiders game, and we previewed the Ravens game, and then we're kind of going. I'm trying to slide us into, since today's a Saints' birthday, some Saints history, and I've kind of talked about a little bit so far. But yeah, it's so the Saints were born this day in 1966. We all know the story. It was sold to John Meekum for 8.5 million. John Meekum was 22 years old when he took over, when he became owner of the Saints. Imagine yourself at 22 years old, and you're now in charge of a professional football team. What must have that been like?
Oh man, I mean, here I am at 26, about to be 27 in 3 weeks, and I can't even imagine myself running a team, getting a franchise like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it was. And he was the son of an oil tycoon, John Meekum Sr. Um, do you know why the Saints colors are black and gold?
I believe you told me, but I likely forgot.
Black and gold because the Meekums got their money from oil. So
Right.
oil was black gold,
Hmm.
Texas tea. Go ahead and do the Beverly Hillbillies theme song, which is before your time, I know. But yeah, that's why it's black and gold. Billy Kilmer was taken in the draft, in the expansion draft. In fact, the picture I have on the for the show tonight is Danny Abramowitz, Gary Quazzo. Um, you kind of cuts a little bit of his head off, but you see Paul Horning, Jim Taylor, and John Gilliam all in that picture. Um, Quazzo was a backup quarterback for the Baltimore Colts, Johnny Unitas, in the 60s. He once threw, I think, 6 touchdown passes in a game, filling in for Johnny Unitas. So everyone thought he was the next Johnny Unitas. We saw this same kind of thing played out later on with Scott Mitchell going to the Lions, filling in from Dan Marino. Matt Flynn, the former LSU quarterback, who threw, I think, 6 touchdown passes for the Packers in the early 2000s. Like, wasn't it like 2011, 2010, something like that? He played. I could be wrong. It could be later than that. But yeah,
what player?
Matt Flynn. The final game of the season.
2011 against the Lions of all
Against
teams.
the Lions, yeah. He threw 6 touchdown passes, so everybody thought he was the next thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Quazzo was supposed to be Meekham's Johnny Unitas. He selected Paul Hornung in the expansion draft because in '66, Paul Hornung had a pinched nerve in his shoulder, could not finish the season. And he signed, okay, I have to explain a little bit of something back then, but back then there was no free agency, of course. Players had option year contracts. And the option year is that a player can decide, I think this is how it went. The player can decide to leave a team in his option year and not re-sign with that team. Could say he was a quote-unquote free agent, but the other team, the team that owned your rights, had the right to a first refusal. So Jim Taylor in '66 wanted more money from the Packers. The Packers weren't going to pay it. The Saints were going to make a big offer because Jim Taylor's an LSU kid coming home to Louisiana. He was the Iron Man, the main the main gear in the Packers sweep. You're thinking you're bringing in Taylor and Hornung. You're going to run the Packers sweep. You're going to be like the Packers. So the Saints offered him a ton of money. The Packers chose not to pay him. And Saints now have Hornung, Taylor, and Quazzo. That's their dream backfield. Problem was, Kilmer beat out Quazzo as a starting quarterback. Hornung's pinched nerve in his shoulder meant he could never play football again. He retires in '67, although he does stay on the sideline as an advisor / assistant coach for a year. And Taylor found out real quick he's no longer running behind Fuzzy Thurston, Jerry Kramer, Jim Ringo, a Packers all-pro offensive line. He's running behind Del Williams and, a lot of the original Saints. And it's not the same thing. And he could never be the star he was. He retired in '68. Quazzo gets traded to the Vikings in '68. So, already the team is going through the expansion kind of, yes, it is true. They gave up a number 1 pick for Gary Quazzo. That is the pick that the Colts used to select Bubba Smith, the first overall pick of the '67 draft. Kind of like, if you remember when Carolina was an expansion team, Carolina had the first overall pick and they had the 32nd overall pick. They had the last from each round. They gave them the first and the last pick in each round. So the Saints' actual only first round pick in 1967 was a guy, a linebacker / fullback from Alabama named, oh, you're not going to know this, Les Kelly. Yeah. He never played it down. He never started. He sat mostly on the bench, and he was gone by '69. A lot of. It's amazing if you think about it too. The Saints were founded on November 1st, 1966. The draft took place in uh, I believe January of '67, and here they are playing in '67. Most teams had a full year of preparing and getting your team organized and getting your front office together and your coaches and stuff. And the Saints never had that. So there was a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to go. Thank you, Tig. I appreciate that. I try and throw a little history in these things. Yeah, speaking of Hall of Fame players and stuff, because of course, um, Jim Taylor and Doug Atkins, two original Saints, were the first technical Saints players in the Hall of Fame. But although they weren't really going to the Hall of Fame because of their Packers and Bears careers, um, the Saints inducted two players into their Hall of Fame: Fred McAfee and Devery
Devery
Henderson.
Henderson. Yeah.
Yes. What do you remember of those guys? I remember something special about McAfee, but go ahead. What do you
Yeah.
remember about Henderson and McAfee as Saints players?
Only thing I remember about McAfee is that he randomly came back to the Saints from like in 2006 just for like a couple games to play special teams. At this point, I was just expecting him just to randomly suit up one day, just because it feels like he's always been there. But Henderson is definitely a guy I do remember the most. Sadly, he didn't play his rookie year. One of the few LSU drafted to the Saints players, but he was always very much a boomer bust player. He would either get you these big play touchdowns or he's going to drop a pass.
What was he famous for at LSU? Do you remember?
The it's at I think it was I remember the game. I never saw it, but I do remember the game. It was against Kentucky. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure some LSU fans about to tell me what the actual play was. But if you ask Ralph Marlboro, he's going to tell you, no, that's not the player. It's actually someone else.
No, it is Devery Henderson. It's a bluegrass miracle in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's caught a touchdown pass, and just like Gary James and Dalton Hilliard. Yeah, there you go, Chad. Just like Gary James and Dalton Hilliard, Michael Clayton was the big star receiver, and Devery Henderson was kind of the afterthought. And when Clayton came to the NFL, because they played together, when Clayton came to the NFL, Clayton went to Tampa, became a big star in his first year with Tampa, and then he just kind of fell off the radar. Whereas Henderson didn't do much, like you said, his rookie year, kind of comes into his own once Peyton takes over and they teach him how to catch. And then he became the big play threat for the Saints. And Allison, your sister's favorite play, is a New England game from 2009 where he is just wide open. I mean, Breeze did that shoulder shake, and then go ahead.
Could have just backwalked into the end zone.
Yep. Yeah.
But definitely his most underrated trait was his run blocking. He was a very, very good run blocker, to the point where I think there was this big play run that happened because his blocking, but was called back to the holding on Henderson. And you look at the plays, clearly not holding. He even goes to ref going, "Why'd you call holding?" He goes, "I've never seen a wide receiver block that well before. You must have been holding."
Now, Fred McAfee came to the Saints in 1991, and I bring this up, like you brought up the Raiders game. Dalton Hilliard was near the end of his career. He would play 2 more years with the Saints, but really 1991 is where his body really starts breaking down. And the Saints kind of go through several running backs that year. Gil Finnerty comes back after playing in Italy in the CFL. The Saints originally drafted him in '86. He looked at the room and realized, I got Ruben Mays, I got Dalton Hilliard, I got Barry Ward. I don't have a shot in getting any chances of playing here. I'm going to go play in Europe. I'm going to play in the CFL. Barry Ward has drug problems, ends up in Kansas City when he comes back. And I forgot about it. He also had Mel Gregg on that team in '86 from the USFL. He came back in 1990, Gil Finnerty did, and he ran the ball a lot because Hilliard was hurt a lot. But in 1991, the Saints drafted Fred McAfee from Mississippi College, not Mississippi State, not Ole Miss, Mississippi College, a little kind of like Hofstra, a little no one really heard of this football program before. And he became the Saints' leading rusher in 1991. They called him Fast Freddy. He wasn't very big, but he was very fast. Um, he he had some good games in 1991, really fun games to watch. And the Saints kept trying to upgrade from that. They bring Von Dunbar in 92, first round pick. In 93, they bring in Derek Brown. 94, they draft no, it was 93. I think they drafted Mario Bates as well. But they kept trying to replace Fred McAfee, but he always hung around. He always stuck. He became a great special teams guy. And then the Saints let him go to Pittsburgh and Tampa, where he still became a special team standout. And then he came back to the Saints in 2000 to be the special teams ace. And on the famous Hakeem drops the ball, who is there right next to Brian Milne? When Brian Milne recovers the ball, there's Fred McAfee. So he had a special career with the Saints. He was involved in a lot of critical games for the Saints. Really just a guy, the kind of guy you needed on your team. Not the star, just a guy who's willing to do anything you want. Now I'm really happy he's in the Saints Hall of Fame. Yeah, he had to fill in. Yeah, he had to fill in for Von Dunbar. Von Dunbar just never panned out. His knee injuries were just the least of his problems. He's the kind of guy, what's the old saying, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. He was the kind of guy who looked the part of a great running back. He had the build. He had the tape that like a great running back, could break out speed, but he had no sense of where the hole should be, no vision on the field. He would just run right into his blockers. It was frustrating running back. I
didn't even realize Fred McAfee made the Pro Bowl in 2002.
Yeah, a special teams guy. Yeah, because that was also the big year that no, was it 82? Might have been 83. Was Michael Thomas on the team in 82? I don't remember anymore. I don't remember. I think it was 83 was Michael Thomas's first year with the Saints. He went to school with your mom, by the way.
Okay. Probably don't remember who you're talking about.
Michael Lewis, Beer Man. He went to Grace King, just like your mom did. And actually, he's a little bit younger than Mom, but yeah, he went to Grace King High School. Who do you think is the most, I'm guessing, deserving guy that belongs in the Saints Hall of Fame but gets overlooked, not including the new guys?
I don't know. That's a good question, John. I don't think I can probably name a person.
Well,
Calvin.
Oh, Emmanuel Butler. Yeah, there you go. Andy Tanner, Anime Ojo. No. Yeah, Freddie Mac. Now that he's in, I'm going to say a guy that really deserves to be in the Saints Hall of Fame and is not in there or gets overlooked a lot. I'm going to say a guy like Willie Whitehead is probably one of them. He was one of those fifth defensive linemen, but he really, when he was out there, he produced. He was like a guy that could have started for a lot of teams and didn't. Willie Whitehead is one that comes to mind. I have to go back and look and see who's in the Saints Hall of Fame from the 70s and 80s teams. Because like Doc Kovac, I don't know if he's in the Saints Hall of Fame or not, but that was certainly my grandfather's favorite player. I don't know about those two. I know Chuck Muncie won't be in the Saints Hall of Fame. He really deserves to be in there. He's a Saints first 1,000-yard rusher, but he's not in it. I don't think Wes Chandler's in there either, just because Wes, of course, he was a Pro Bowl receiver with the Saints, but he really became the player that everyone knows as a San Diego Charger. So yeah, you kind of have to go back to guys like that. Emmanuel Sanders, somebody else I could think of. Yeah, guys that didn't have a lot of success end up, or players that were considered backup players, usually end up getting lost in the shuffle, and people kind of ignore them. So those are the kind of guys I could think of off the top of my head like that. It's tough because I'm not putting a Frank Watlet in there. I don't think I would put Whitney Paul or any of those guys in there.
What was the name you said earlier?
Who's that? Willie Whitehead?
No, I think
Doc Kovac.
Doc Kovac, yeah. Okay.
Doc Kovac, Jim Kovac, number 52.
Okay, yeah. I was just taking a look at it and looking at all the people that are on here, and I don't think he's on here.
He's probably not in the Saints Hall of Fame. He only played for the Saints for 4 years. He was drafted in 1979. He became a starter in 1981 when Bum Phillips came aboard and made the Saints change the Saints defense from a 4-3 to a 3-4. You had Ricky Jackson and Doc Kovac, Rob Nair, and Glenn Red were the original linebackers. And Doc Kovac, he was going to medical school. That's why I called him Doc. And he ended up leaving after the 1984 season. He played one more year in the league in 1985. Oh, your grandfather hated Bum Phillips for letting Kovac go. He usually led the team in tackles. He was a lot like Pete Werner today. He led the Saints in tackles, and then he played 1 year in San Francisco, and then he went to medical school, and he's a doctor. So yeah, he was your great-grandfather's favorite player. He was mad when Kovac left because he was a smart guy. Who do you think from the Super Bowl team? Well, I'll give you another question instead, because the Saints Hall of Fame, before it's all said and done, almost every single player from that Super Bowl team will be in it. Who do you think will be the next Saints Hall of Famer, not named Drew Brees?
Probably Tracy Porter, I think.
Well, not the Saints Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Oh, Pro Football Hall of Fame. Ooh, okay. Yeah. It's a shame Colson will never, because he never got voted into a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Because, that's just how it goes. You have to make the Pro Bowl at least once, even if you're a substitute, and it's just it is how it is. But I want to say Jari, like John Butler said, and it's just hard for offensive linemen in general to make it. I mean, I know he's now eligible, but it's probably going to be another 10, 15 years before he might even make it to the semifinals.
I want to say I think it'll be Evans. I think Jari Evans has a good chance of making this to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Cam Jordan is a guy who I think has a good shot of making the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Just because no, Reggie won't
not
make
Reggie,
it.
no.
Not Reggie. But I think Cam Jordan has a good shot, only because I think his longevity, he's got the lineage. His father, Steve Jordan, was a longtime Vikings tight end. I think he has the Pro Bowl and All Pro,
Yeah.
appearances. So yeah, it's one of those things that um, I think that's the two guys I'm looking at most.
Yeah.
Um, Pat Swilling, yes, he should be,
But he probably won't.
but if Pat Swilling would have played his entire career with the Saints, or if Pat Swilling would have been like Ricky Jackson and ended his career in a Super Bowl with a Super Bowl team, I think he becomes a no-brainer. Um, the problem was once Swilling was away from New Orleans, he kind of falls off. He ends up in Detroit. They make him a 4-3 defensive end. He's not as good. Then he goes to the Raiders, and he became a pass rush specialist with the Raiders. It's just hard. Um, it's hard to see him making it the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it's a shame because Pat Swilling is my favorite member of the Dome Patrol. Last story of the night, speaking of the Dome Patrol, so Ricky Jackson only missed one game in his career, never taped his ankles, didn't wear pads in his knees or his thighs or his hips. He took all his pads out because it slowed him down, and he hated taping his ankles. And Jim Moore famously said, if you ever twist your foot, hurt your foot, or break your ankle or hurt your ankle, I'm going to fine you like you cannot believe because you refuse to tape your ankles. Ricky Jackson never injured his ankles. He only missed one game, and that's because he was in a car accident. It's now a CarMax out in Kenner, off the airport road. Yeah.
I was just talking about.
Yeah, but if you go, you got Lamarck Ford dealership right there on Williams Boulevard. Behind Lamarck Ford, there's a CarMax, okay, before you get to Loyola.
Yeah.
There used to be a bar, hotel and a bar out there. It was Club 57. Now, this is the famous club that Lorenzo Neal cold-cocked Mario Bates and broke his jaw in because Bates wouldn't buy a round of drinks back in 1994.
Yeah.
But Ricky Jackson was coming home from that bar in 1991, or I think it was 91. It might be 19. I might be going back in time. It might be 89. Anyway, I don't remember the exact year anymore, but it's the year that the Cage face mask appears. Ricky Jackson's hauling ass in his Corvette, piles into a back of a tow truck, and not like the tow truck with the two straps, and you pull the car up, a flatbed tow truck.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know how high a flatbed tow truck sits and how low a Corvette sits, you hit that, the back end of that thing's going through the windshield, and if Jackson doesn't move his head, probably gets beheaded by this thing when he piles in the back of it. As it is, it breaks his cheekbone. He misses one game. Okay, he missed one game. Came back that next week with the Cage face mask, with the visor and the whole bit, and played the rest of that season. His cheek was all swollen. He still went out there and played. That's the kind of warrior Ricky Jackson was back then.
I think it was 89 because I'm looking at his stat thing. It shows. Well, 87, apparently missed 4 games because it shows he only played 12, unless that was a lockout year. But yeah, it shows 89. He played 14 games, started 14 games, so I'm assuming it was 1989.
Yeah, that would be the one, because the game I think he missed was the Tampa game. That's the game that Bobby Hebert got knocked out, and he knocked all his front teeth out. And he had a concussion that was so bad. And then he had cotton all in his mouth because it stopped the bleeding because they knocked his front teeth out. John Forcade comes in runs a couple of series. They do out of bounds, tackle him out of bounds, which is now a horse collar tackle. Bends his knee back. He sprains his knee. He can't go back in. Abear's got to go in with a
Oh, is that the
concussion.
smelling salts game where they
Well,
gave smelling
they gave him
smelling
smelling
salts,
salts, and
and
they
then they
had
had
him.
the center basically call the plays?
Dalton Hood had to call the
Oh,
plays
Dalton
because
Hilliard.
because Abear not only couldn't remember the plays, but
He didn't even
he
know where he
couldn't
was.
talk. Yeah, he couldn't talk because he had cotton in his mouth, sucking up the blood from his front teeth getting knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Paul Boudreaux, who was the offensive line coach, said, I don't told the offensive line, I don't care if you get holding calls in every possession, nobody touches Abear because if Abear got hit again, he's probably dead. But that's the way they played the game. And yeah, that was a loss to the Buccaneers. Real quick, we only got a couple minutes left, kind of went over time a little bit. Predictions for Monday night's game against the Ravens. You're playing at home on national TV. Ravens have never lost in the Dome. How do you see this game playing out?
I think depends. I think once the Ravens get the ball, they're probably going to move down the field and maybe get a score, because right now the Saints are 2.5-point underdogs on betting lines for that Monday night game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the real pain in the butt of that game is probably not going to be Lamar Jackson. It's probably going to be wide receiver Devin Duvernay. I can just see him because he's one of those players where you'll underestimate him and he'll just have this good game. And I think he's going to be the matchup nightmare for teams for those corners. So, but I think the Saints might get a win. I think they might win. I'm gonna say 26-23. It's going to be a close game. I think it's either going to be a close loss or close win. It's not going to be like how it was Sunday.
No, I don't think it's be a shutout. But I mean, here's the thing about the Saints and football games that I've seen all season long. There's a lot of bad football being played out there, and I've said this before. The Saints have been competitive in almost all their games. Yeah, that's a tough game. That bothers me. And yeah, that is the infamous 79 Raiders game from December of 1979. That's
Oh,
playing in the background.
did you see Ralph Marlborough's photo? So he was at that game, the Saints Raiders game, and apparently the Saints fan had a homemade
Yes,
jersey of Kenny Stapler and his split Saints and Raiders, and I'm
I
like,
saw that.
that is
I
just
did.
so funny, ridiculous.
Well, and the funny thing is, Stabler didn't wear 12 when he was a Saint. He wore
Yeah,
16.
yeah.
He wore 16. So yeah, that I understand he's trying to do a Raiders Saints thing, but yeah, didn't work. That he wore 12 as a Houston Oiler, but not as a Raiders game. Yeah, that 79 game, I'll never forget that game because I went to bed. It was 35-14. I went to bed in the third quarter because back then Monday Night Football started at 8 o'clock Central Time, not 7. So halftime happened around 9:30. I got to stay up, watch halftime highlights, and watch the first couple of series of the third quarter. And Ken Bordelon picks off Ken Stabler and runs it in for a touchdown to make it 35-14. And I'm going to bed thinking, oh, we got this game won. We're going to the playoffs. We're going to win. And back then, and it's the same house that Granny and Papa still in right now, Matt. Back then, though, the kitchen table had a lamp that just hung over it. There was a kitchen table, no bar in the middle. That's where the kitchen table was. And the extra room that's on off to the side, that didn't exist. That was a wall with the back door leading to the backyard. So your papa would leave the light on for me over the kitchen table. And he'd leave and go to work. And he had the paper sitting right where I sat at my chair and the sports page sitting on top, and it had "They lost" in big letters on the front of that sports page. And I kept looking at it going, I don't understand this. We were up 35-14. How did they lose this game? There wasn't enough time. How did this happen? Well, Cliff Branch happened. That's how this game happened. How they lost that game. But
Yeah.
the second quarter is probably the most fun you'll have as a Saints fan as a kid from that game. Um, Probably this side of the Atlanta opening game that Sunday, 79. Second quarter in that game was the same way. But yeah, that was just a total meltdown. So I watch it and I always turn it off after halftime. I can't. I've watched the whole thing a couple of times just to see how it unraveled, and it really it was an amazing thing because the Raiders got on a roll, like I said, and Cliff Branch happened, and they couldn't match up with Cliff Branch. Nobody could on that team, and Branch they almost knocked Stabler out the game. Stabler, Jim Plunkett starts warming up at one point, and Stabler came out and he got hot. He found Cliff Branch and started making plays, but and the Saints offense couldn't do anything. And Muncie fumbles. At 35 all, there's about a minute and something left. The Saints are trying to drive at least for would ostensibly be a great game-winning field goal drive, and Muncie fumbles, and the Raiders take advantage, throw the last touchdown and pass to Cliff Branch, and that was the end of the game. They couldn't win that one. Yeah, having Roquan Smith, I don't fear Smith, but it does make it a little more difficult to run the football. I think Smith on Kamara is a mismatch. I think as long as the Saints in this Ravens game, as long as the Saints don't make mistakes like they have played a lot of one-score games. Don't make the mistake. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make the critical penalty. Don't give up the big play. And the Saints should win this game because I think they can control the clock, wear that defense out, keep Lamar Jackson on the sideline, and make Lamar Jackson have to beat you with his arm, not his legs. But if they allow the Ravens to move the ball at will and turn this game to a shootout, they turn the ball over, fall behind by double digits, I think they lose this game. So I am going to say, for the sake of argument, I think they're going to win this game, but I'm like you. I think it's going to be a close game. It's probably going to be a little more high scoring than what we like. I'm going to say it's going to be 34-31 kind of game. A lot of points scored. So I think that's the key. Are you surprised the Saints didn't make a trade for anybody?
A little bit. I thought they would. I think because Mark Ingram has a grade 2 sprained MCL, he's going to be out for about a month. I thought they were going to make a move for a veteran running back that a team just has spares galore, and they're willing to give up like a 2024 seventh or something. But I will say one thing. So in that big trade the Broncos made with Miami, Miami traded for Bradley Chubb. They somehow snuck Chase Edmonds in that trade, and he's going to Denver. Already they got Melvin Gordon and, of course, Latavius Murray. I would not be shocked if they cut Latavius Murray on Wednesday.
What about Melvin Gordon? You don't think they'd cut him?
No. If they do, I'm first in line trying to claim him, but I think it's probably going to be Murray.
Okay. That'll make a lot of Saints fans happy because they felt like the Saints missed out on Murray. I think Murray just happened to have a really good game, but Murray as a long-term answer is like a poor man's Ingram right now. I don't think he is. I don't think he's explosive as people think he still is. I think he can get some plays where he's going to pound it inside, but other than that, he's just not going to. He's not going to be the big play guy that you need him to be, or the consistent pounder that you need. Yeah, I know Lamar Hunt was not Lamar Hunt. Lamar Hunt was a former owner of the Chiefs. The running back for the Browns, the backup running back.
Oh, Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt, thank you.
Yeah.
I know
He,
Kareem Hunt was on everybody's wish list, but
yeah.
I think that you can't give up a fourth round pick for that
Yeah,
guy.
Browns were saying it's a fourth or nothing, and yeah, you don't budge on that. And I think he's going to be a free agent after this year. And if you look at the
Exactly.
free agent class for running backs, it is stacked. Like you got Josh Jacobs, Rashad Penny, Damon
Hmm.
Harris, even Kareem Hunt. I mean, I I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints were especially active. Like I would low key would rather get like Rashad Penny or Josh Jacobs because I know
Oh, I
Penny's got
love
the
Josh Jacobs. I'd
yeah.
love to have Josh Jacobs.
I mean, I would like Penny because even though he has a broken fibia, he clearly still has that speed and burst that makes him a home run threat. And he's got a great build too, 5'11", 220. He, I would like him as a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it'd been nice to have a guy, but well, Chad, I can only say that they did seriously pursue Deshaun Watson. So, I mean, yeah, they want a good character guy, but at the same time, sometimes talent. And if you feel like he's kept his nose clean and long enough, you kind of overlook some of the character issues of the past. Um, yeah, so I was a little disappointed they didn't do anything, but at the same time, I understand that you don't have very many draft assets. As you can see from what the Dolphins did, what some of these other teams have done. The Bears, for example, they're stockpiling draft picks.
Mhm.
The Eagles are stockpiling draft picks. That's the key to really making it in the NFL today is having a lot of high draft picks.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I'm glad they didn't make this move. Um, all right, Matt, thanks for filling in for Bob, who was out sick. I appreciate you taking this time. The show almost went 2 hours here. Uh, thank everybody for participating. I appreciate everybody sticking with us. Again, Sean is slowly progressing. He's had his surgeries. He is still at LSU Shreveport, last I heard.
I
Um,
thought he got transported to Monroe.
I don't think he's at Monroe yet. Last I heard, he is no longer in ICU. He
Hmm.
is in the hospital still. He still has a breathing tube, but he has had his first surgeries. He's had his, the fingers and thumb amputated. But I have not heard anything since. I've
Yeah.
reached out to his wife to see, or his ex-wife, I should say, to
Mhm.
see if she has any more news. She hasn't given me any updates or anything like that. So as I get
Oh,
news, I will pass
yeah.
it along.
I'm assuming he can't take visits yet, can he?
If he's not in ICU, he can.
Okay.
Um,
Because since I'm in Longview, if no one here is from Texas, Longview is about 2 hours away from Shreveport. It's right close to that Louisiana border. I was actually thinking about taking a Saturday, driving up to Shreveport and gonna go visit him.
Well, find out what hospital he's at first. And make sure he's
If
still
he's
at
at
LSU Shreveport, the Burn
yeah,
Center.
hmm
If he's there, find out when they take visitors. And I want you to drive 2 hours for nothing. So,
yeah,
um, you know, if you do, let me know. And
yeah. Um, his ex-wife name is Michelle, right?
right, Michelle
Okay.
Kirkland. Yeah.
Oh, Kirkland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. All right, guys. Thank you guys for sticking with us this long. I really appreciate this. And we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.